This is SimNews.TV, and you're listening to the Superleague show. Hello, everybody. Yes, it's the halfway point in the season. Exactly. We have done half of the races. We've got half of them still to go. And that is an appropriate time, I think, for some reflection as to how the Superleague 2017 Championship in the Grand Prix Virtual World Championships are currently faring. Jake Sanson here on the microphone once again. And beside me, as always, we have Ben Willis and Kacper. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
And joining us for a bit of expert analysis as well, it's the scrutineer. It's Mike Pittman. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, all.
Right, so hopefully this will be a little bit more scientific than some of our other shows have been, because there might be a fact or two that accidentally wanders into the program, which is fine. We're okay with that. That works. We can handle that. So let us talk a little bit, first of all, about how things have been going for the first half of the season. It's been pretty much almost one-way traffic for the entire season, with one team and one man in particular very much in charge of things in the first half of the season, Vodball Racing and their man Rudy Van Buren. Although there have been times when he's looked vulnerable. Those are basically very, very slim in the first half of the season. But in the latter stages of the first half of the year, Ben, we have started to see signs that he can be beaten. Maybe not necessarily on a regular basis all the time, but he can be beaten.
Yeah, I mean, we saw at the start of the season, Rudy was just on fire. You know, apart from the disconnect he had in Russia, he was unstoppable. Had a little bit at China with the rain, but I think it caught a lot of people out. It was pretty unexpected, but then a 4-race win streak was just pretty insane. But as you say, at times there's been the odd fault. Britain obviously comes to mind where maybe they didn't get the strategy right at Vodball, and that did cost Van Buren the win there. But mostly he's been looking pretty dominant, and it's been a really good start to the season.
In fact, if we look at the standings so far, Kacper, it's been very interesting to note that basically all but 3 races this year have been won by Rudy Van Buren. And if you don't count the failure of the internet connection from Rudy Van Buren at Russia, he has not finished lower than second this year so far.
Yes, your squad set for that win in Russia as well, to be fair, until that disconnect. So, yeah, finishing not lower than second essentially is, I think, a show of dominance. And we can talk about wins, but what counts is consistency. And he has it both, really. So Rudy has just been taking everybody away. You know, you can get a win here and there, but look at consistency of any other winner, Bold, Geyer, Cooper, the only 3 others, and they've not been on a podium more than twice.
It's a very good point.
Or sorry,
actually.
more than 3 times.
I hadn't noticed that, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's not been as consistent a year for those who have taken the victories. Mike Pittman joining Super League show not for the first time this year, but certainly when all of us have been here for the first time. It's worth making a note of the fact that, you know, his lead at the moment, Rudy Van Buren has over Risto Capit is 64 points. Now, mathematically, that is just 3 race victories, and we've got 9 races still to go. Does that mean he can be caught and beaten this year, or is it going to be a little bit more difficult than that for anyone to even consider it?
Well, as you've just said there, the consistency that the guy has is incredible. So even on a bad day, coming second, that means that the championship isn't going to be going anywhere. The only thing that could do is if he has more races like Russia, where DNF or the intent drops or whatever it may be, that sort of element. But from a driving perspective, I think it's kind of there now. And when you think actually his teammate is his next nearest rival now as well, that's another factor that plays into the hands for him.
So let's talk about the 3 big themes from the first half of the year in Super League in 2017. The 3 big themes, and I like to call them the 3 T's, as it were. We've got tyres, teams, and total domination. Those have been the talking points in the first part of the year. Let's start with total domination. Obviously, we have to look, Kacper, at Rudy Van Buren's form. He's been good before this year, and he's been a very, very talented racing driver. But let's be fair, this year, he has really hit his stride, and it's been a form, even from Rudy Van Buren, that we have yet to see. Before this year, last year he had a couple of victories in the Midnight Motorsport car before joining Vodball for the Brazilian Grand Prix at the end of the year. But he has just not lost a race since. He's only started 15 Super League races, and he's won 8 of them.
We have seen him in a couple other a couple other race series as well. And every single time we have seen him, he's been very fast. But what he's been doing this season has been beyond what we could have seen. I think the closest thing we can compare his season to at the moment, in my eyes, is probably last year's season in Super Cup with Lars Brugman, who absolutely dominated it as well. So I think that kind of a comparison comes to mind, where by the middle of the season, you just knew that Lars is going to take it. And I think it's the same thing here. It's amazing.
So, Mike, you're the engineer here, the scrutineer in this, but what is this down to? Has he just clicked with the new regulations better than anybody else, or is this something that he's been threatening to do for a while anyway?
Well, like you say, he did very well last year as well. He's definitely got the talent, incredibly so. I do think that, like, at the very start of the year, when we were saying that they really got something right, I do think that him and the team generally seem to turn up to race one seemingly more prepared or more ready for the mod or more practiced. I don't know, but they just seem to have a little bit of an advantage the first few rounds, and it's taking that time for teams to catch up. Whether that was sort of down to the upgrades as well, where we've seen a lot of teams now copying the upgrade path that team's taken, and that has brought the field a bit closer together as well. Even the races where there has been issues, you've had like weather involved and things like that. So actually, from a driving perspective, he has always had it there. It's always whether he do the full series, and if he could complete the whole year, I don't think there's anyone's mind that he'd be right up there. Regardless, it's more just it's probably a bit of a surprise that he's got quite as big a gap as he actually does. And some of that is the fact that there isn't the consistency from the other guys that have been, touted as and have race wins. But they just haven't had the consistency throughout the whole season. They've got either specialist tracks or the car's been very good for one race or something along those lines. Whereas, as we've seen in the past, with, say, Fidek, who's got 2 championships, just being consistent and always on the podium can get you those titles.
It's a very good point. I mean, let's ask that question, Ben. Why is it then that Rudy is, no lower than second this year? And there are other drivers in the season, of course, who have won races. We'll talk about that in more depth a little bit later on, but those drivers are not as consistent as Rudy, and nor is anybody else for that matter. I mean, yes, we have to mention David Fidek, getting those good podiums in, but why is it that nobody else is able to be as consistent as Rudy is? What's the missing ingredient?
I think it's more a combination of factors, really. Van Buren obviously is extremely talented, and that goes a long way to making sure he's always up fighting at the front. Getting those decent race results. But also, I think if you look at all the cars, the Vodball always has been quick, and that's partially upgrades. That also partially seems to be car setup. I've said it a few times. The car going around corners just looks so planted, so comfortable to drive. I hesitate to say that because I don't think racing is ever comfortable, but it just looks like a car that both Rudy and Risto can really push and get the most out of it, and I think that's really helped both of them to be up the front of the table, really.
Okay, that's looking at the total domination aspect of the championship. We have to come to the next one. The big elephant in the room in 2017, of course, is tyres. Now, that has really changed the form book of the 2017 Super League season, and I think everybody has been actually quite surprised as to how races have played out as a result of it. Mike, you're the scrutineer here. How big an impact has what we thought the tyres were going to do and what they've actually done made in the bearing of this season? I mean, how big a difference has it made?
Well, it's massive, really. I mean, ultimately, I think actually the actual tyres themselves aren't necessarily not necessarily an issue, but they're not necessarily, they're probably what we expected. Whereas last year we had we didn't have the choice of tyres. You got given the 2 options. That was what you were going to have. So certain races you would have been given the option of you've got the tyres, the hards and the mediums, where everyone just you had to deal with it. Given the option here, everyone's gone, well, you know what, we can actually do much faster races just on the really quick tyres, doing a lot of stops. And there isn't that balance between the two, and I think that's probably more the issue than the actual tyres themselves. Because loads of people have proven they can go quick on the tyres, but that might just be for a smaller amount of laps. And it's quite reminiscent, really, where there's a lot of people that if you can last, it's who gets that balance. You can really get the tyres lasting, or you can get the speed, and it's the people that are getting up the top of the people who've got a little sweet spot where they can keep them lasting 2 or 3 laps longer than some. And you look back at the season so far, and you can name the people that can't last with these tyres and the people that can, but they're in the same the cars aren't that different. They've all had the same options to upgrade. And it's all about testing and just being behind of what you can do with it. It's all preparation work. If you come in trying to drive it like a rally car, you're never going to get the tyres going.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've looked at this over the course of the first 9 races of the year, Ben, and we've seen so many more pit stops, I think, this first half of the season than I think there's ever been in the Super League's history. It's been incredible seeing how races have played out, where teams are having to make, sometimes 8 or 9, even 10 pit stops over the course of a race, depending on how things have currently worked out. I mean, is that good for the sport? Do we think that needs to be improved?
I think it's got a little bit into the sort of the territory of being a bit stupid, to be honest. I think when you get to 7 or 8 pit stops, it gets confusing for me, at least. I think for a lot of people trying to keep track of all the strategy and how it's changing over so many stops, just it all gets a bit lost. And I think where the whole idea of Super League is to emulate real life top tier motorsport, and maybe with so many stops we're sort of losing that a little bit. But you could argue that it's added a lot more unpredictability to the racing, at least not for whoever's winning. But throughout the majority of the grid, it has given us some pretty crazy action. But I think it's maybe just a bit too unrealistic and a bit too far at the moment.
I mean, yeah, it's a difficult situation because we're trying to look at it from a purist point of view and looking at this from a sporting aspect. And it's almost the way I've been sitting thinking about this for a few weeks. And the way I look at this, Kacper, I've actually come up with an analogy that I think this links to. And you may giggle at this or not, I don't know, but this is kind of how I see it. In that what's happening with the tyres in Super League are a little bit akin to what's currently going on in FIA Formula One with components penalties. Sometimes it just gets a bit too farcical when 6 or 7 things are having to be changed in one weekend by, say, Honda, McLaren, for example, and they're giving 57 grid place penalties. I mean, it just looks ridiculous. And is that kind of a similar comparison maybe to Super League? Has it got to the point where at times it is just a little bit too ridiculous?
Maybe a little bit in a way. It is definitely getting too ridiculous, and I have been, I've been the person who has called out these tires. I think from race 1, how I felt like this is not going to be good for the show with this many pit stops. And from the very start, I've said that these tires just have one big issue. And while I agree with Mike that there is a lot of drivers, kind of a driver choice in it, I don't think the driver choice is for the tires itself. It's just how you drive it, because the hard tires are just so slow that there's no choice. They don't last long enough and aren't fast enough to be competitive. So that's more of a joke than how many pit stops there are. I think drivers are just using the tires to the best of their ability because they have no other choice.
Okay.
Can I step in there? I'd argue there's 2 points. That one, the mod sort of was made without us actually really knowing what the 2017 spec cars in Formula One would really act like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
And the second part is it's realistic in the terms of all the teams are trying to maximise the options that they've got in front of them. So they've been given the option of these tyres. They can drive them however they want. If they want to drive those mediums and hards and do one-stop race, they can absolutely do that. It's up to them, and it's in the same way you do in Formula One, and you know, like you say, Honda and that, they probably don't need to change all those parts. When you've got 20, 30 grid penalties, you go, well, I might as well do 60 and make the best of it. So it's kind of the same element where if you can do 3 stops, but actually I can use the ultra softs and do 4 or 5 and end up 3 seconds quicker at the end of the race. Why not?
Absolutely. So what I want to ask then, Mike, is that we've had this conversation a few times in Super League show. You've obviously touched upon it a couple of times in the scrutineer. It's all very well us sitting here and saying, well, the tyres aren't good enough. Oh, we need to do something about it. What actually is the solution? How do we fix this? What do we do about it?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it, I suppose? And I'll make friends or not either way. I mean, to be honest, arguing I'm rather biased. We are leading both championships. I'd quite happily stick as it is. We'll probably win if we keep going.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
putting your scrutineer cap on.
Putting my scrutineer cap on and sort of as a watch. I quite enjoy all the pit stops because I watch other leagues and you stop once and it gets pretty boring because you do get people that run off into the distance and there's no gamble. They might not. Do they pit? Do they muck it up? Do they muck up the tyres? That sort of element. Because if you mess up the tyres with these, there is such big differences in in it that you really can catch up so big a gaps if you make a mess up with the tyres. A bit like we saw in Hungary. You know, people picking the wrong tyres and stuff. It didn't really work. So that's one. But I think the other option is that we could do that option where you don't have free choice anymore. If you haven't got the choice of all 5 tyres and you go and everyone's forced at particular tracks like we used to use those tyres, then it might play into the hands of other people at certain tracks and come back to others at other places. But ultimately, I'm never a big fan really of changing rules mid-season. I think people sign up to a particular series and that's kind of how they stick to it, unless there's something fundamentally wrong and dangerous or that makes it undrivable, and I'd argue it's not undrivable. I'd say we're getting some good racing.
Okay, that's some interesting points. Right, I suppose we can go and pick up tyres again at a later stage when, you know, we get a race with 17 pit stops per driver in it. So let's talk about the teams. Obviously, this is the point in the season when we need to assess things. Obviously, from Vodbull Racing's point of view, things have been pretty incredible. We've touched on Rudy. What about Risto? It's been interesting, I found at times, Ben, to observe the way that Risto has been racing up against Rudy van Buren. At the start of the year, there was a lot of good, positive thinking from both drivers. They were quite cool to race together, with Risto, you know, supporting Rudy wherever possible and having a go himself. In the second half of the season, it does seem to me a little bit that the frustration is starting to show through for Risto. He's had opportunities now to win, and for whatever reason, he's not had the opportunity to see it through. And I think it's starting to get to him a little bit.
I would fully agree there. I think there's a couple of times where through sheer just bad luck that he's lost the chance for a win when he should have been on for one. And either that or through driver error. I mean, Canada, he just clipped the wall of champions on the second lap and did the rest of the race with suspension damage, and that cost him a win. Risto's an extremely good driver. Is he as good as Van Buren? Based on the first half of the season, you'd have to say no. But I think there is the chance he could win a race in the second half of the season, but I can't see him holding a candle up to Van Buren anytime soon. Unless over the summer break, you know, Kacper's put extreme amounts of work in, and has, you know, found wherever he's lacking to Van Buren. And yeah, I think that's the only real way he's going to sort of really compete with his teammate.
And you have to say as well, from not just the Risto Kacper point of view, Kacper, but also, you know, Vodbull in general, they just seem to have got their car absolutely spot on, not just once or twice or 3 times through the season, pretty much everywhere. You know, they have not finished a race this year where one car isn't on the podium. That is astonishing.
Yeah, and although to be fair, every single race except for Russia, we had Van Buren on the podium. So it was just that race that Kacper kept that streak going. But yeah, no, Vodbull has had a car everywhere, as you said, and they've just been putting the time, I presume the practice. They just did their work before the season, and it's paying off very big time with 2 really quick drivers. Although, again, Kacper is not quite up to par, but he's still very, very quick.
Absolutely. Okay, so I just want to very quickly ask, because I know obviously we don't want to be spending forever and ever talking about each team, but Mike, I do want to ask you, putting your Vodbull cap back on again. So take the scrutineer one.
That's dangerous.
Vodbull one back up. I know, but I do want to ask in regards to the Risto Kacper situation. How do you keep somebody as very, very confident and, you know, highly competitive as Risto motivated when the frustrations are still there? How do you know, when Rudy is getting all of the glory and all of the plaudits, and he has not finished lower than Risto Kacper once this year, if you don't count Sochi. I mean, he would have beaten him there anyway, but, you know, every time he's finished, he has been ahead of Risto without fail. How do you keep that motivation going for a driver who's just as competitive, just as eager to be on top, but just isn't able to get there?
I think Risto's doing an incredible job this year. But I think actually I think what really drives him actually is I know you guys see a little bit of potentially, like, you know, frustration there, and there is after races, because he so wears his heart on his sleeve, Risto, that actually when he has made those odd errors, it really hurts him, because he knows that he could do better, because he's so good at it. If Rudy wasn't here, which, at the moment, looking a step above the rest, you know, he's ahead of anybody else anyway. He's doing an incredible season, but and the amount of work the guy puts in behind the scenes, But I think what really drives him actually is racing and testing with Rudy is improving his driving. If he can race Masters, he can race World GT and beat people by a lap. That's not helping him in any way develop as a driver. Actually, what he's doing here is helping the testing they do together. They're like looking at each other's lap times and replays and stuff. They can get within like under a tenth lap time together. There's a little bit of work. I mean, I wish I wouldn't argue. There's a little bit of work still to do on tyre management compared to Rudy, but he's getting better. And compared to the rest of the field, he's still up there with everyone else. So I think that's probably what drives him. Is actually it improves himself. It's he's taking a season and actually he hasn't gone right. I want to be a number one driver in a team, which arguably he could walk into any team on the grid probably and be a number one driver for them. It's actually I want to beat the best, and I can only do that by racing the best.
And to be fair, even if you took Rudy Van Buren out of the championship standings, Risto would still be leading the championship by 5 points, which is quite incredible when you actually take that into account and think of that. That's pretty incredible. Right, let's move on to Norwegian Racing, reigning champions. They are still second position in the team standings. It's very easy to miss that unless you actually do your homework, because Norwegian this year, Kacper, have actually been really, really strong whenever they can be. And Florian Guy's breakthrough victory at Silverstone, definitely one of the highlights of the season for me.
Well, we have kind of slacked them off in the first half of this half of the season, so the first quarter. They did have quite a bit of bad luck and some questionable results there for the first a few races of the season. But recently they have had a breakthrough, and they have had a podium in every race since Monaco. So I think they're doing a great job, and at the moment, I think if they just keep it going, they may not be able to catch up to Rudy, but they're definitely fighting, and I think they're on the good way to finish second in championship standings, and I think that's the best they can really get this season.
It's a very fair point. Ben, it seems that, to a certain extent, we are starting to look at David Fidek basically practicing what he preaches. He always says, it's the second half of the season where I really kick on and hit my stride. We're getting to that stage now. And it's, the last couple of races where we've seen him on the podium more times than not. He's had 5 podiums this year compared to Florian Guy's 3, one of which was that victory at Silverstone. And you do get the sense that Norwegian are building to something. Maybe they might be able to hold a candle to Vodbull after all.
Yeah, we have to look to last year with Nordson, where they were, like this year, sort of hit and miss, scattergun kind of approach to getting podiums until the mid-season break, and then everything clicked, and they were suddenly, they were race win contenders. They were really consistent, bringing in loads of points, and that's what ultimately won fight at the title. So, is that something they can repeat this year? Hopefully, should give some well-desired competition to Van Buren and the Vodbull guys. I'm not sure Mike will want that, but from the neutrals' point of view, it would be nice to see. Can they catch up to Vodbull? I doubt it. It's a massive gap.
Well, if we're going to grade teams out of 10, I think it's fair to say at this point in the season with Vodbull, you can't really give them any less than a 10 out of 10, because they really have been absolutely incredible pretty much everywhere. If we were to grade Norwegian, I don't know, I would probably put them at an 8 at this point in the season, just because they've been so good in the latter stage of the season. They had that hiccup at the beginning, but they've come back and they've built from it. There's a potential for more victories on the way. They still have a chance to build upon it. I'd say 8 is a fair assessment.
Yeah, it's been the consistency that's let them down, and that's if they were week in, week out scoring, third place, fourth place to Vodbull's 1-2s, then they'd be a lot higher up there. The problem is they've had the odd blip in results. Guy's 15th at Valencia in the DNF for Fidek there as well was a pretty poor round for the guys. And again, Guy's 10th place at Hungary was not ideal. So if they can improve on consistency, they can get closer.
Okay, so that's Norwegian.
Just to jump in there for a second as well.
Yeah, sure.
I completely forgot until now, but I remember this was Fidek's first ever DNF in Super League. But ever since that DNF, I nearly have a feeling like David, something kind of clicked in David's head that he has to kind of gather up himself and ever since, he has not finished lower than 5th and finished 3 of the last 5 races on podium. So
yeah, it was almost as if that was said. He said, "Enough, enough now. We really got to find something extra here."
I think if he can keep this going, I think we're going to see a lot more podiums from him, and possibly, well, hopefully, he's going to fight for some wins.
That would be amazing. Let's move from Nordian to the 3rd place team in the running, to Mad Cape Racing, who, let's be fair here, Mike, have punched well above their weight on more occasions than not in what is arguably one of the worst cars in terms of upgrades through the course of the season in the championship, and yet they're sitting there in 3rd position due to the consistency and never less than 7th in races this year of Lee Morris.
Well, yeah, from a total points point of view, the car definitely is the worst on the grid. You cannot argue with that whatsoever. Whereas I think people like, I actually think Norwegian have made a few errors on the technical side throughout the season so far. They really have missed a few tricks, whereas Madcave probably made the best of what they've got. Arguably, I actually think they could have done a lot better. From someone who actually Lee Morris's ability, which I don't think can be argued with the pole positions over a lap, he can be as quick as anybody. But to actually then go, well, actually, he hasn't got a win yet. He's been consistent. And the team itself, the second car, if you can't guess who's in the car half the time, let alone where they're going to finish.
That's it. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the second car has finished once this year in the hands of Ryan Walker at Valencia. In Michel de Jong couldn't bring it home. Nick Rowland in the last 4 races has failed to bring it home. That's where they're losing out, basically. The second car has only scored 3 points all season.
Yeah, I mean that is unacceptable, and yet they still are 3rd in the standings. So I think that just shows how many points one driver has actually brought in.
Yeah,
so I think
fair play to Lee Morris.
As we'll get down to some of the others in a minute. I mean, realistically, there's not many teams that have got 2 drivers scoring consistently. And that does mean that actually, and certain teams look like they might be getting their act together. So if Madcave don't, they really could be at risk of dropping, a good couple of places in the standings realistically. Still a new team for this season, so actually to be even up in the top 6 is pretty good going for a new team. You do kind of forget that sometimes with some of the displays that they have pulled off.
So let's grade them out of 10. I would like to give them 7, but I think 6 is probably fairer the mark. Largely because all 6 of those points are Lee Morris. All 6 of them are Lee Morris.
I would dock at least a point there.
Oh really? Okay.
I'd argue if you're looking and going, yes, they've made the most of a poor car. It's their fault they've got a poor car.
Yeah.
From a team perspective, they had the same chance as everybody else. There was a new team in Street Fighter who had the exact same points, and they're sitting there with the second best car on the grid currently.
It's very true.
They're not making the most of it, but why it's. If they're going, well, we're making the most of the worst car. Imagine what they could do if they had a brilliant car.
Okay, yeah, but 5.5, is that fair?
Yeah.
5.5 out of 10. I can't believe we're on the 3rd team in the list and we've already gone to a decimal point. This is ridiculous. Anyway, 5.5. Okay, let's move on to Hawkeye Racing, who I have to say I have really been entertained by this season. I think pound for pound, they've probably given us some of the best entertaining laps all season long, Ben. I mean, Alex Cooper was there to pick up the pieces in Russia and would have been second even without that. But then the rest of the year, I don't want to say it's been a comedy of errors, but you do know that where there's been, opportunities to impress, they've been entertaining for not just the right reasons.
Yeah, they're like the comedy double act of GPV. There's been some brilliant moments from Cooper.
Surely you can't compare them to John Cleland and Derek Warwick.
Well,
can you?
Maybe.
Oh,
but,
okay.
I mean, yeah, Cooper has some really good results. Picking up the pieces at Russia when Van Buren had his disconnect is obviously a highlight there. But equally, Alston in that second car has made quite a few silly mistakes and hitting walls and that. And then, of course, who can forget the double engine failure at Canada, where someone forgot to put some decent engines in at one of the highest engine use tracks. Will that change in the second half? Hopefully. They have a really good chance of catching up to Mad Cape if they can just nail down that sort of top 5 area with Cooper. And of course, something we haven't mentioned, Lucas Euler, double world champion, is coming back to GPVWC.
Yes,
to replace
I did want to talk
Thompson.
about that. Yeah, I did want to talk about this because, Kacper, this is going to potentially transformed their season. I mean, let's not forget what Lucas Euler is actually going to bring to this team. I mean, he was the world champion in 2012 and 2013 for Midnight Motorsport. He's raced 41 times over 4 years. He's won 19 races, which is very nearly 50% of every race he's ever started in the championship. But this is going to be a new formula for him. He hasn't raced since the early part of 2015, and he hasn't won since Japan 2014. Is this going to be a masterstroke for the team, or could this backfire in their face big style?
At first, I don't expect him to possibly challenge yet. Maybe he'll need, but he can. We don't know much about his pace. Last time we've seen him race in Super League was, again, 2015. And that was the first year of R Factor 2. And he hasn't shown dominance that he has shown in R Factor 1. So we don't yet know if he's going to be quick enough to really push the likes of, again, I dare to say, Risto or even Rudy. I highly doubt it. But after a while, who knows? But one thing that can backfire is that this is the most expensive driver in the roster in GPVWC because of his past. So it can backfire in the further development of the team and general funds if something was to go wrong.
So let's grade them out of 10 then, Mike. It's tricky. Shall we call it I don't want to say a 5, because when they're almost like, do you know what? Hawkeye remind me of the little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. Do you know what I mean? When they're good, they're very, very good. But when they're bad, they're horrid. That's kind of how I see Hawkeye racing. They have these brilliant moments of excellence, and then it just all falls apart on the seam in a comedy of errors. So 6, is that a bit too nice, or is that not nice enough? I don't know.
That's kind of where I was thinking. I mean, up until the changeover now as well, they were one of only 3 teams to have kept the 2 drivers, so they've stuck with their strategy for the year and sort of gone with it. And and Cooper arguably has had some good results, like you say. Again, let down the second tape. They put if we're scoring them a 6, are they actually better than Mad Cape? Probably not. They have made errors in teams as well, like you say, with the engines. Ben, it was, turning up to an engine with 8% life in it is, why'd you bother? You'd have done better driving the car that you turned up to the track in.
No, you'd have done better. You'd have done better driving the car backwards, because then the engine would have lasted longer.
I'd probably say they were about 5.5 as well. Realistically, if I'm honest in that way, I can't score them higher than Mad Cape, but I can see them finishing above them potentially this year.
Okay. That seems fair and reasonable, actually. Right, let's move on to the 5th place team in the championship, Valters Automotive. Where do you start? At the beginning of the year, I saw these guys, Kacper, as the ultimate challengers to Vodbull. I thought, right, this is going to be the team that's going to take it to them. They were a little bit hiccupy in Australia, but the pace was threatening and bubbling under the surface. Again, in Sochi, they had an opportunity. Then, bang, they come through, and Shanghai, it looks as though we're getting somewhere. Spain, a bit of a hiccup, but Austria, boom, right on the tail of Vodbull again. I genuinely saw Valters Automotive as the team to threaten them. But again, in a similar way to Mad Cape, it just seems to be Gergo Baldi that's doing all the work. And in the last couple of races, he's just looked like he's been pushing himself too hard to maintain it.
Yeah, I was actually about to say that this is a very similar story to Mad Cape. We have one driver who finishes, and then the second driver has finished twice and only once in points. Taranku has finished on 15th once. So we're talking about even less of a score than we've got from the second driver at Mad Cape, which is highly disappointing. Yeah. So, and Baldi has kind of dropped the ball a little bit there at the end of this for the last few races. It hasn't finished the last 2 and hasn't scored a podium since Austria again. And
I mean, what's that down to, Mike? What is it about when one driver kind of has to carry the form of the whole team? Because it's clear, unfortunately, that they're really starting to struggle in terms of depending upon Daniel Sharanku. I mean, I would have loved to have seen what Jarl Tain could have done if he'd have got to the finish of those 2 races, because particularly his qualifying pace on Silverstone, I felt we were robbed there. him being caught up in a start line incident. I felt we were robbed of seeing what he really could have done. But, you know, what do you do when you're the one man dragging a dead horse across a racetrack? You know, it must be really tough.
Well, yeah, I mean, from what I hear though, Shanku is very much the setup guy. He's the guy that puts in the hours. He put in thousands of laps. He does all the Motec work. So I think his value is there. Like, not necessarily whether he'd be a better test driver than being in the second car, but I think it was a fair gamble to give him that seat this season. Whether it's obviously not paying off currently, but and there is that pressure if you're then the only driver taking the points to the team. If that driver has a DNF or an accident, or like you say, a crash on the first corner or something out of their control, then it really does impact the team so much. I mean, Boldy did some brilliant drives, but he was one of the guys that really struggles with his tyres and does lots of stops. He's one of these that just burns through the tyres, but doesn't very, very quickly per lap. So, but we did see him then try and change his strategy up, and I think was it Austria or Canada he did that, where he went and did much longer stints and a lot less, and did really well out of it. And then I don't know why he's decided to revert back to form, and unfortunately has come across a couple of DNFs with that. You know, it can be very much who you're racing as well. If you end up down in the pack, or there's been a couple of back of the grids as well that has impacted these guys quite heavily. If you start at the back of the grid and have to go through a field that isn't necessarily used to your speed coming past you as well, there's so many hazards that you just don't want to have in your, you know, playing into your game. If you're at the front and you qualify at the front, and you know you're battling your people that are in the championship with you, they're a bit more careful with you, and you know what they're like. You're racing with them all the time, and you give them a bit of space. You know where you're at, and that it's just less elements of worry, and you don't have to look in your mirrors quite as much, I think. But I can see Boldy's a great driver. He'll come back. The other side is he's potentially slightly turned by other series elsewhere. I would hazard to say, in that he's doing very well elsewhere at the moment in some other series. And I'd argue that maybe he's looking at that more than he is at this.
Yeah, it's a good argument. So what do we say then here? Bet you know, at the start of the season, I would have said 7 or 8. I'm actually going to go for no more than 5 with Valtters Automotive, because it just seems to be that they faded. They just faded.
Well, I don't know. If you compare it to last year, the fact that they've got wins and podiums, I'd say is more worthy of a 6. I think it's been an improvement on last year, where they had at least 8 or 9 drivers, I think.
But then in the last 2 races, they've looked pretty darn average, it has to be said.
True, they're in a bad patch, but that's what the summer break's for. It's to regroup, to learn a bit more about the car, about the setup, and hopefully they can hit the ground rolling.
From a technical team management perspective as well, they haven't made put a foot wrong really this year. They seem to have developed well. You know, still being quite new to the series, they picked up pretty early that they potentially made the wrong error first race development wise, and picked up on that and went really far. And they're also developing quite well with Martex at Nordjylland, I think, as well. So from the management element that's off the track, I think they've done a much better job than Hawkeye and Madcape. Arguably on the track is supposed to be very similar. Okay,
so we say 7 for these guys.
Yeah,
7. I'd say that's reasonable under the circumstances. I had forgotten how well they did in the first half, and I was so harsh. Please don't kill me. Don't kill me, Gerd. Please. Anyway, we've got Red Archer Virtual Racing Team. Now, I look at these guys and I just beam. I beam with delight. You have to give these guys credit. They are 6th in the standings. They have 92 points, and they have failed to bring their car home twice in 18 attempts. For any man's money, that is the best form of any team in the championship so far, other than Vodbull, which is incredible. Yeah, well done. So, yeah, I mean, they have been absolutely brilliant. I mean, even Nordjylland, who are 2nd in the rankings, can't say they're that good in terms of bringing their cars home. They've had 1 more DNF. So you have to say, Ben, it's wonderful watching these guys do what they're doing, because, yes, they're doing it with less experience and less to hinder on. But these are the guys who are the Force India F1 of GPVWC. They never give up, and whatever they do it really well.
Yep, and I think Thomas Hintz has been an absolute standout this year. Consistently, every race he has scored points in some form or another. He's been amazing on the tyres that we've talked so much about. He's constantly surprised me and Kacper with his tyre usage. And yeah, it's just been a really good start to the season for Red Archer. The only thing I'd say is it's becoming now, the last few seasons, Red Archer are this midfield team that are just there, which is a bit like your Toro Rossos in F1, your Force Indias. They're there, and they'll turn up, and they'll get points, but they're never really pushing on, if you know what I mean. So that's what I'd like to see from the second half of the season, is to build on what they've got at the moment, and just sort of keep building it and try and get ever so slightly closer. And with Nikos in charge, they've got plenty of experience. So in terms of upgrades, they'll be strong. So yeah, interested to see where that one goes.
And it's been the musical chairs of the sport as well, because we've had Dan Benefield in the car alongside Thomas Hinds. We've had Jason Muscat. We've had Jeff Fournier. We've had Wright Kilk. And most recently, we've had Michael Ayres. But interestingly, every single one of them has brought their car home in the points, Mike, which is pretty incredible going when you consider how tough it is to get straight in and be competitive. And all of them have scored points.
Yeah, don't forget as well, Thomas Hinds wasn't even the first choice. Canapino was put in the car before the season started. So there's so many. It's the most, to be honest, it's the most unlucky team from a driver perspective I've ever come across. Like, arguably, they've probably got the best manager on the grid. He's better than myself. It's quite happy, but he hasn't got the drivers. I mean, it doesn't take much to be better than me. But nonetheless, they have this problem with keeping drivers there, or just unlucky, and they come along with promises and think we can do this, and they do well. They get in the car and they drive. He builds a good car every time, picks a good engine. And then he puts these guys in the car, and they know what they're doing. They work really well together. Thomas Hinds lasts those tyres better than probably anybody. Arguably, he's not the quickest car on the grid, but he pulls that car and he keeps those tyres going, and that is getting him some great points. And to be honest, I think he'll get a podium this year. I do.
So let's say with this car, considering how, punching above their weight they are, I would give these guys a 7, and I think they've earned it.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much accurate. Although the one thing I'd have to say, though, about Red Archer is they did take a step backwards from late last season. Because we have seen some brilliant performances from Fran.
Yeah, okay.
But they lost Fran. That's the thing.
Yeah, they did lose Fran. So I think considering that has happened, they are still doing an absolutely brilliant job compared to where they are. We need to. That's the first half of the grid.
Arguably with Fran, they've done better not having him in the car.
Very true. We've run through the top half of the grid. I want to go through the bottom half very quickly, so we'll take a little bit less time over the bottom half. You want more time? Do a bit better in the second half, guys. Kerno Sports.
Wow.
Let's talk about, harsh, shots fired. Bence Zibanek, Bar Devosh, and Dan Benefield. That's an interesting combination of drivers there. Zibanek has looked okay at times. Bar Devosh, he's almost a victim of his own circumstance at times because he's been competitive. He knows how to get the car up the front, but he has binned it on 3 very, important occasions. And I think they've lost points in, good opportunities.
Yeah, but then we've got to think a few years back to where Canal were as a team. Let's remember back to 2014 when they were virtually on bankruptcy, and they lost the Krev to that engine. And since then, it's almost been sort of a rebuilding project. So to be holding P7 again, that midfield region, and they are now that team, a bit like Red Archer, that will be there scoring or trying to score points week in, week out in that midfield area.
Yeah,
it's decent. Okay, I think they'll want to do a bit better, but it's okay for them.
Out of 10, 6, should we say?
Yeah.
5, 6. 6. We'll stay at 6. That's fine. Right. Street Fighter Racing. They have scored points in every race this year. Not both cars coming home, though, but they have managed to score points in every race this year, towards the lower end in some cases. Maciej Manek, who played the super sub brilliantly at the start of the year. And then, of course, there are 2 regular drivers, David Francic and Ben Horrell. They've been getting there. There's been progress with Street Fighter. I would have said at the start of the season they're about a 5 or a 6, but they're starting to get more towards 6 or 7 out of 10, Kacper. They're starting to impress me a bit more often nowadays.
Well, one driver doesn't impress me really. That's Ben Horrell, to be honest.
Okay, so Ben Horrell, maybe not so
much.
much.
But aren't they a case like Madcap, though, where it's more a one-driver team?
Yeah, but David Francic, okay. I mean, and it is tough when you're the only one really bringing the finishes on a consistent basis. I mean, fair play to Ben Horrell. Last time out, he did finish 11th, but then all you had to do to finish 11th was finish. So,
to be fair to Ben, he scored more points than the second Madcap car and the second Hawkeye car put together.
Yes,
Which
Mainly-
just shows how badly they're doing. But
Mainly in that one race, though. So we should point that out. Most of those points were in that one race.
but
So
but also just quickly as well, they do, as Mike mentioned, have one of the best cars on the grid. So
and they're not making good use of it. Yeah, I see your point.
yeah, so I honestly don't. While I see that Frančić is doing really quite well over the last few races, I have a feeling like that's not quite. The team is not doing quite as well as we'd hope, but they are here for the first season, so.
And there's
I'd say
potential
something
there,
like
isn't
that.
there? There's
Yes, there is
potential
a
to
lot.
grow on
There's
for the next few
potential.
seasons. They're showing, in terms of potential, a good start.
So let's say 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
5. There's potential. Yeah, you have to kind of take the rough and the smooth and say 5 out of 10. Okay.
yeah, I'd probably said that it's good management there. That they've kept the same 3 drivers they originally started with.
Yeah.
They've developed the car very well. Ultimately, Frančić, to be fair, he's coming what 6th and 7th and stuff. Actually, the people that he's finishing behind are, I think he'd argue are in a different ball game at the moment to him. So I'd say he's probably doing as best he could. If that second car could get there, then they could easily be 7.5 to me. It's something like that. I think actually from a team, it's just being let down by one small element at the moment. But I think that's a fair result.
So let's move on to the 9th place team, Adonis Engineering. What's the best way to sum this up? It's been interesting. It's been interesting from Adonis because, yeah, when the good Fran Lopez turns up, we have an absolutely amazing race. I mean, you can't look beyond Spain as one of the highlights of his year, probably the highlights of his career. He was locked in Mortal Kombat with Gergo Baldi, and rightly so. The rest of the season, he's had flashes of brilliance, and it's just all come awry. And then you've had, 4 other teammates in Oskari Kantanen, in Dennis Jordan, in Vodka Hoekstra, and in Maurice Bracan. They've all scored points. They've all had flashes of brilliance. I genuinely thought at one point Maurice Bracan was going to finish on the podium at one point in Hungary. Do you know what? They're hilarious and they're wonderful at the same time, is Adonis Engineering. You get the best races you're ever going to see from Adonis Engineering. They are the best of times and the worst of times in one squad, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, they've certainly provided entertainment. We can definitely say that. My problem with Adonis is where they were last year, in that they were second and they were so close to the title in terms of constructors and in terms of drivers. Okay, they lost both drivers they had last year in Masculi and Fransconi. Is that his name?
Yeah, Fransconi.
That's it. Yeah, I had a minor mind block there. Anyway, yeah. So they lost both of them. Lopez has been hit and miss compared to his form at Red Archer towards the end of last season.
What is that? Is that him in the middle of a race battle? Was that harsh?
Touche.
I'd say with Fran, he did very well last year.
Yeah.
Getting wins, and he was brilliant. And actually, he's now, and I think last year that was pretty much all he raced.
Yeah.
And a bit like we saw with Baldy, he now races in other series and iRacing and all this sort of stuff. And I think that can turn your head a little bit, particularly if your team's not doing as well as you maybe had thought it would have done.
Very true. And I think, again, it's a case of the second car not pulling its weight in that.
Well, that's an argument, but if your team isn't working quite so well, then you need to figure out what it is about that team that's not doing so well. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's the thing. I want to give Adonis a good score just because I get so much fun out of commentating on them, but it's hard to give them anywhere higher than a 4 or a 5, really.
Yeah,
I agree that given where they were last year,
4.5.
Yeah.
4.5. Sorry, Adonis. I wanted to be more generous, but you can turn it around in the second half of the season, so go and do it. Right, Storm Racing. Now, we had that breakout 4th position from Emmanuel Gasgela, and that started the season off to a great start. And ever since then, well, it's just been dismal. I'm sorry.
Bit of a shocker, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been such a shame because I thought with Emmanuel Gasgela doing such a great job in Melbourne, we were onto something there, and he's brought home points in China, and then he left. And ever since Emmanuel Gasgela has left the team, it's just been, unfortunately, a bit of a shambles, really. Adrian McNaughton has done the best he could wherever possible. They brought in Menno Klont for a few races. They brought in Sven Schubert for a one-off, and last time out we had Mike Quint come in and do a one-off. They even missed completely the British Grand Prix. So it's been a really difficult a difficult scenario really for Storm, hasn't it? And nobody really understands why.
Well, the problem you've got is if when you've got a driver-manager combination as a team, if he loses interest or drops out or misses a race or something, then you can't, normally in a case if your manager's not around, your drivers can pick up the pieces, or if your driver's not there, you can pick another driver in place. If it's the same person, you have some real trouble there.
Yeah.
And equally, it has been, so I think it's been reasonably common knowledge from Gagzella that actually that they've sort of gone, what is a general strategy for a team that's only in their second season to save cash and money this year, and they pretty much just wanted not to finish last, I think is sort of their aim for this season. I think they were really looking at the 2018 year. You remember they got a race win last year. I mean, this is a team that was in their first season got a race win. So there is speed and potential out of this team, but I just think that I'd be looking at them as next year.
It's commitment levels really where they're subpar, isn't it?
Well, yeah, to miss a race entirely is unacceptable. It just is.
I'd say with these guys, I don't know, because Gagzella did do well when he was there.
But that was basically 3 races, and he one of them. So
being brutally harsh, I wouldn't rate them higher than a 2, given where they were last year.
2.5 or 2, yeah.
Yeah, two. Let's be generous and say 2.5. 2.5 to Storm. Sorry, guys, but yeah. Again, there's chances to turn it round, so let's hope the second half is better than the first. And then we come to our good friends at Woods Racing. Tom Jacobs, Lewis Redshaw, and Matthew Churgwin as drivers through the season. Churgwin only the once. The first half of the year, they did score points in all but one of the races, being China, namely. They both fell off in the wet. Very, very easy to do. But ever since Canada, it has been an absolute farce in every way, shape, and form for these guys. I mean, Canada, only one car showed up, and in the last 2, they haven't even been there and have pulled out. So what is this down to, Kacper? I mean, why have they suddenly gone from points every race to nothing?
Well, we did know right after Canada, basically, that they did pull out. They had drivers pull out right before Canada as well. We had the drivers not committing, and Woods not able to find drivers for Britain, and the manager basically seeing how this is not going to work out and pulling the team out, and the drivers just didn't feel like they enjoyed the car. So, we can't. It just happens, and it's very unlucky to see Woods gone, but.
Especially with a team with such history as well.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, this is Woods. This is Woods Racing. This is not some namby-pamby team that doesn't know what they're doing. This is Woods Racing, who have a great history in the sport. I mean, it baffles me, Ben, and maybe Mike, I don't know if you can chip in on this as well, but it baffles me why a team like Woods, who have that reputation, can't come to some of the other drivers in the championships below them and say, look, this is your opportunity. Let's step up. Let's work together. Let's push something. I mean, why didn't that happen?
Unfortunately, this period of the year, drivers lower down in the tiers are usually locked in. For example, I manage a team in Super Cup. I wouldn't want my drivers going off to Super League now, because that would leave me stranded when they've committed to my team for the year. Yeah. So the driver market naturally is a complete cruel, and for a lot of teams it's been a struggle to find replacement drivers till sometimes an hour before the race, and chuck someone in, and they've really struggled in the car. It's a tough car to get to grips with, and if you're not enjoying it, then I think it's a bit of an honourable decision even. So
I'd say there's a couple of bits with it though. Being a very long-standing team, arguably, as great as we think all this is, it is kind of a hobby to most people.
Yeah.
You do it for 14 years. At some point, you do eventually
grow tired of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and equally, the drivers as well weren't newbies. They're not like, they were equally, experienced people that have been around the block as well. So potentially there's that element of it. And I think Ollie, arguably himself has said many a time, he's not really, he's never actively like, I'm going to search out and find drivers. He's never been that kind of manager in recent years anyway. He's always struggled, and that's just what, everyone has the faults and everyone has their specialty areas, and he's ultimately said that himself. He did put the advert out, but I don't know how much further went than that. It is a shame to lose them off the grid completely. Of course, it is to lose any team, and particularly one of such long standing.
So with a team that's got that reputation pulling out mid-season, I don't want to be harsh, but they're not there anymore. They're done for the season.
But to be honest, if you don't finish the season, can you score them more than?
Can you
Can you
well,
get a score? Can you get a
zero?
score if you don't finish?
A zero, I guess. Yeah, 0. I suppose. Yeah.
What about DNS? Did not score.
Did not score. Okay, yeah, because they didn't finish.
That's rubbing it in a bit, isn't it?
NA
I
not
suppose.
applicable.
Okay, well, jury out on that one then. And then finally, I don't mean to laugh. I'm so sorry. It's very unprofessional to laugh, but they're kind of my favourite team. They really are, to a certain extent, my favourite team. I do love them. Green Stripes Racing. I just, in the same way that I loved the 40, the Pacific, the Simtech, the Super Aguri, the Hispania, the Spiker, all these teams that bookend the grid. I just love them. I just do. So you've got Matt Varley, Matt Beavis, Ben Willis, of course. You drove for them 4 times this year. Gerrit de Vries, and most recently Dan Lovett. And they finished both cars in the points, of course, in the Hungarian Grand Prix, albeit completely ineligible to score points because they were so far behind in terms of laps completed. I mean, you've got to love this team. They're wonderful in that they never, ever give up, and I love them for that. They are the Minardi of Super League in 2017. It's the heroism I love.
Yeah, it's the Spiker of 2007, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They are the kind of team. Green Stripes Racing are a team that remind me of a bit like the way Scotland plays football in the international stage. They get stuffed by Zaire in the qualifiers, and then they beat Holland on the way out just to prove that they can. I love the way that happens. And Green Stripes are like that. It's like, yeah, okay, we're rubbish, but we're still going to get to the finish. We're still going to push it as far as we can. And I adore them for that. I love them for that, because that's the sporting nature of a race team. That's what makes teams great. And it's that determination and that never say die attitude that is what we love about them. And yes, they've only scored 4 points, but they have raced within their means. They have punched above their weight where they can, and they have just gone on with it. And Mike, to be fair, isn't that what the whole point of this is? We're supposed to have fun. We're supposed to enjoy it. Green Stripes epitomise that for me.
Oh, absolutely. And I think actually, look at the last race with those 2 guys. I mean, they did so many pirouettes. It was like they must be dizzy when they came out there. But they kept going with it. They used up all the rear wings and all the front wings and all the spare tires and every bit of paintwork is now painted green around the whole track. But it was like they kept going right to the end, or near the end for them.
Let's point this out. No, we giggle about it, but let's point this out. Neither of the Wouters Automotive cars finished in Hungary, and neither of the Kernau cars finished in Hungary. But both the Green Stripes cars did. I want to make that point. They did, and they were doing a much worse job. So well done to GSR for keeping going.
I think as a team, they've developed that car really well. That's a good car on the grid. From a team manager perspective, they've done that. The downside they've got is they were aligned to the Trinity engine, which was Woods. So going forwards, that might be an issue in that they're not around anymore.
Just a bit of an issue.
A little bit.
But that might make them an engine supplier. Yeah, they could.
That's true.
So who knows? So there could be good things in that future of that team, and I think it's a stable team, as in financially and managed quite well, and they haven't actually missed races really yet. So actually, it's just the quality of drivers and maybe a bit of unfortunate, not saying anything bad against you, Ben. Obviously, that maybe is needed. But I could see that team. I can't see that team dropping out. I can see that team, even if they did go down, they'd be very suited to Super Cup.
Ben Willis finished races twice.
Hashtag forever 16.
Absolutely, forever 16. We love it. Do you know what? Just for the pure heroism of it and their never say die, laissez-faire attitude, I want to give them 3. I want to give them 3 out of 10. I really do. Because, as you said, that's a stable team doing a reasonable job. They never give up. They have not missed a race yet. And teams with better reputations and better, drivers have done. So, I want to give them 3 out of 10. Does anyone want to argue with me on that one?
I'd go with that. I think actually, considering how well aligned to Woods they were, not just from a development for the engine, but everything else, they could have easily pulled out at the same point.
Yeah.
And they stuck it out. Yeah.
They have stuck it in. So, 3 out of 10 for GSR. And I will absolutely religiously and delightedly wave my GSR flag from the stands whenever I can get out and watch practice. I love them to pieces. Right, we've talked a lot about it. There's a lot of things coming into this second half of the season. I know we've rambled on forever and ever. 40 minutes, sorry. But yeah, I mean, this next race after the summer break, we have to talk about this because there are so many factors that will make this, in my opinion, just about the most competitive race potentially of the entire season. There are several factors that make that the case. The first of those being it's at the Nürburgring, which is a very tough racetrack, and you know, some drivers get it right and some get it very, very wrong. You've got a lot of development in terms of testing time, 4 weeks worth to get those cars better. And then of course we may well see the Lucas Euler that won 2 world championships. We may well see an uncompetitive Lucas Euler, but we may well see a Lucas Euler who might actually be able to take the fight to Rudy van Buren. He won't beat him in the championship, but he could take a lot of points off him. This second half of the season has an awful lot to be happy about, particularly, Mike. I think the German Grand Prix could be very exciting.
Oh, absolutely. You think that's Euler's home Grand Prix as well, coming back to, so that's quite a big thing for him. But and actually, I saw him on. He was briefly on the test server with. He was actually up against Morris and Cooper at one point, and he was on their pace pretty instantly. So there could be big things there, whether or not that across a whole race distance and things like that. But yeah, from a German Grand Prix perspective, there's so much technical stuff that can go into that. I mean, obviously, I'll do a plug here, my own scrutineer show next week, which will go into everything about before the race. But
absolutely,
all the bits and pieces there that everyone's now had so much time to develop. And whereas we've seen across the course of the first half of the season, particularly some of the big teams being off sync with each other. So one, because you can't develop 2 races in a row. So to develop what for one race, like for example, Vodbo and Nordström did sort of been alternate each time, but now they'll have both developed for this round, and so presumably they won't develop the one after. And there's an opportunity as well for somebody lower down the field to decide, you know what, I'm not going to develop for Germany.
Yeah,
I'm going to write that one off and go, you know what, the race after I'm going to dominate. There is that option, because you can. If you don't, because it's 4 weeks, if you don't have to develop for the full 4 weeks, you could develop for 2 or so, still get an upgrade in for Germany, and then upgrade again for the following race. So you'll see some teams doing a big upgrade for Germany, and I think it'll even out a lot of the field, particularly the top half. From an engine perspective, from a car perspective, could really catch up. Granted, Mad Kate probably won't, but everyone else will have caught up pretty evenly now, I think, and that should create some great racing. There's no excuses then, is it? It's driver skill, a bit like race 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. Ben, Kacper, is Nordström seriously going to close up even more than they have? Can we do something about it? Is Nordström going to take the fight to Vodbull Racing a bit more than they have done?
I like how you almost said Red Bull there.
Do you know what? It's so close to the truth. It doesn't even bear thinking about at times. in terms of level dominance, this is what I mean. In terms of the level, I never ever want to see a Formula One season like 2013 ever again. And I
wouldn't mind it this year.
I was about to say, please don't.
I know you wouldn't, but yeah, we're almost at that point with Vodbull, and I just want to see Nordström give it a bit more gusto. Can they do it?
Depends how they upgrade for Germany. I think if what Mike has been saying, in that they sort of fall back on sync, or they try and play it competitively and plan their upgrades that way. Maybe they'll have a chance where they'll have the better car than Vodbull and get some solid race points under their belt. On
that development, by the way, just remember they didn't bring anything to the final round, so they've had even longer to develop.
Yeah. There we go then. That could definitely be what they need for Germany. It's so tough because Van Buren is doing so well. I'm not sure if Nordström can crack it. It all depends how much work they put in over the summer, and of course how much of a hindrance Euler will be to all of this. Because again, we don't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think they're going to be a lot closer in many ways. And one thing I think that Nordström has to improve on quite massively is a lot of the time their qualifying is in a different. I think they often actually went for a slightly harder tire, if I recall correctly, as well. So I'd say they're going to have to step up their game in qualifying, maybe do something more similar to Vodbull or something like that, and try to maybe get pole positions. And I think that way they may be able to put up a fight. There's not going to be a fight for a championship, I don't think. It's too late for that. But for individual races, I think the game is on if they can just do it and they can put in the work, which they did last year.
Okay, well, we will find out. It's not too long to wait now, folks. We will wrap up now. I know it's overshot a little bit. Hey, you've enjoyed it as much as we have. We know it. On the 26th of July, Mike Pittman will once again don his scrutineer's hat for the scrutineer at 6 p.m. Once again, all of the technical bits and pieces that you need to know for the second half of the season there, no doubt, Mike?
Absolutely. Everything and all the upgrades we've been talking about there will know by then. So I'll be able to tell you it all before you watch the race next Thursday.
Brilliant. And we are back, of course, the week after that, which will follow the German Grand Prix, and that will be on the 3rd of August. Don't forget to support the corporate partners of GPVWC, Downforce UK, on Twitter at Downforce UK, and on their website as well, downforceracing.uk. Follow us at SLShowSN on Twitter with the hashtag SLShow, and there'll be plenty more to come from us. Thank you very much indeed to Mike Pittman, to Kacper Kolodicic, and to Ben Willis. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And of course, we wrap up with the first half of the season by saying it's all been one-way traffic for Vodball Racing and their one man, Rudy van Buren. But in the second half of the season, will Nordtjen have more of a say? Will Risto Capit start to close up on his own teammate? And what can Lucas Euler bring to the table? I'm rubbing my hands with glee. I can't wait. We'll see you for the second half of the season. I'm Jake Sanson. Thanks for listening to the Super League show, and we'll catch you next time.